But right now, I want to welcome Brandon Arnold, who's our first guest. He's the Executive Vice President at the National Taxpayers Union. And Brandon, I wanted to get your thoughts on the looming government shutdown. We have a continuing resolution just for 45 days, and how that also interplays with how student loans are coming back and some of these issues that McCarthy is, I think, genuinely trying to resolve. But, Gates has other thoughts.
Yeah, good morning, Jenna. And so many moving parts, so much chaos taking place on Capitol Hill right now. So let's try to unpack a little bit of it. We have this 45-day continuing resolution that was put into place over the weekend. This is not a solution to our crisis by any stretch of the imagination. This is a short-term patch to avoid what would have been a shutdown situation that I think would have really disadvantaged Republicans. We've seen shutdown after shutdown, and thanks in part to the media and the stories and anecdotes that we get out of government shutdowns, the general public almost always blames Republicans for shutdowns, and it weakens our position. It does not strengthen it. So this buys us a month and a half, and during this month and a half, we really need a laser focus on getting these spending bills done. There's 12 spending bills that are supposed to be processed and sent to the president's desk each year. The House has only passed about 4 of them. The Senate hasn't passed any. There's a lot of work to be done. And this is what is really important to lay the groundwork for the meaningful spending cuts that we need to achieve. It's becoming a lot more difficult. It's already really difficult in any environment, but it's a lot more difficult when you have the level of infighting that you just referenced with regard to Gates trying to oust McCarthy. Without Republican unity, it becomes almost impossible to achieve these types of spending cuts.
Yeah, so what is McCarthy's next best move then in terms of trying to get something that's meaningful and actually keep his speakership? I mean, it almost seems like it could be a self-fulfilling prophecy that now that Gates is saying, we're not having unity, he's causing that in a sense, and so then it's setting McCarthy up to fail.
Yeah, it's a really tricky situation for McCarthy. I wish there was a clear roadmap to move forward. We need to set aside whatever personal disagreements take place. We need to try to remove, to the extent possible, it's impossible to do this entirely, but try to remove the politics out of it. You alluded to some political considerations, people running for higher office and so forth that really complicate this matter further. But at the end of the day, we need to move forward with these 12 appropriations bills. And we need to do so not just, again, to cut spending, but buried in all of these spending bills are what they call policy riders. And these are the most important provisions, perhaps, of the entirety of the bills, because they are really the only realistic chance that Republicans have to push back against the Biden administration's rogue agenda. And here's what I mean by that. The bills say not just this is the spending level that we're going to send to the Federal Trade Commission or the Department of Labor or whatever. They also include these provisions that say, and the Department of Labor cannot use any of these funds in order to achieve policy X. And that could be things like cracking down on independent contractors, which is something the Department of Labor is trying to do right now. That could be stopping the IRS from creating a taxpayer-funded tax service that would compete with private entities right now. That is another thing that the IRS is trying to do. These policy riders are essential. They're not going to materialize on their own, and they're not going to stay in those bills unless Republicans fight for them, get all these bills passed and over to the Senate, and really roll up their sleeves and get to work.
And so this seems like the conservative coalition really needs to get together, and there is a lot of chaos and emotions are clearly running very high, but cooler heads need to prevail if we really want to get all of this done. So on the other side of the aisle, what is the Democrats' agenda in terms of just sitting back and watching this kind of unfold, or what is their main issue here?
Yeah, I mean, they're popping a lot of popcorn right now, sitting back and watching the Republican Party implode. They are in an extremely favorable position right now. And the longer this fight plays out, the less work that Republicans do to get these spending bills passed, to start to achieve the spending cuts that we need, the more it strengthens Democrats' hands. So Biden is loving this. Chuck Schumer is loving this. Heck, even the House minority, which is usually a very weak minority because the House is a majoritarian body of government, they have more power than they ever have, and it's all being handed to them by the Republicans' inability to agree on just about anything. I don't think they could agree right now that today is Tuesday if they put it up for a vote. At some point, they're just going to need to sit down and lay down arms and realize that, Matt Gaetz is not the enemy here. Kevin McCarthy is not the enemy here. And I don't even like to use those terms, but if you're talking about the march that we have to large government, we're going to have a $2 trillion deficit this year. That's absolutely staggering. We're pushing $33 trillion in national debt. If you think that the main people driving that are the Republican Party and House Republicans, then you really have misguided priorities. We need to see the bigger picture here, the forest for the trees, as they say, and try to work together. We're not going to solve this problem with a series of bills this Congress. This is a long-term fight. We need to do things that are going to address them in the long term. But in the short term, we need to achieve at least some marginal victories here in the direction of taxpayers.
I'm speaking with Brandon Arnold, who is the Executive Vice President of the National Taxpayers Union, and I think it's so apt that you say they can't agree on anything, even something as simple as saying that it's Tuesday. And I actually had to check my calendar when you said that. But it makes you wonder how the founders ever came together and actually debated and discussed and wrote our Constitution. I mean, it's a miracle that they all agreed on some foundational premises and then got together and created this document. It's like our Congress can't figure out even what party they belong to and what the same goals and interests are and how you work and compromise. And I think a lot of that is so broken. And because of that, especially for the conservative side, it is just handing a lot of wins to the left. And, speaking about the national deficit and the state of the economy, it really makes it easier for the Democrats to run on promises like forgiveness of student loan payments, for example. So student loan payments resumed starting yesterday. And so that was, of course, during the whole COVID pause. And how is that potentially going to impact any of this on the larger scale and looking forward into 2024?
Yeah, great question there. That's a huge story, particularly for a lot of families right now. They've gotten a 3-year break from having to pay their student loans. During that time, interest did not accrue. Great for those families, maybe not so great for the taxpayers. And let me first say, I'm very sympathetic to people who are struggling in this economy, and to have an extra $200, $300 expense pop up this month, that's going to really hurt a lot of American families, and I'm sympathetic to them. But at the same time, if you borrow that money, you need to repay it. That 3-year period was too long. It made sense during the pandemic. It was implemented originally by Trump, as you know, to get people through a very uncertain period. But the pandemic's been over for a long time, and those payments should have resumed a long time. That being said, Congress needs to be sympathetic to these folks because, like I said, many of them are struggling. It's tough to put food on the plate here. It's tough to fill up your tank with gasoline these days with prices going through the roof. So I think there are ways that Congress can help these families that doesn't have anything to do with the student loan situation, and that is just improving our general economy. The tax package that I really like cleared the Ways and Means Committee earlier this summer that would expand the standard deduction. That means a tax cut basically for working class America. It would incentivize businesses to stay in this country, to invest in this country, research and development, machinery, you name it, to create jobs. Those types of policies, I think, will blunt the impact of having these student loan payments resumed.
Yeah, and that kind of focus was something that I think all of the working class America just loved about President Trump, because he spoke to those things. He implemented some of these policies that really did create a great economy. We have pre-pandemic, and of course, all of that was so unprecedented. And yet it seems like none of the Republican coalition and even the GOP primary candidates aren't really focused on some of these issues. I mean, for Matt Gaetz, for example, to be more focused on vacating the chair with McCarthy, with all of these things going on, it seems like there is such an emphasis on politics in Washington instead of actually getting things done. So what can the average American consider in terms of what we can do and what we should be paying attention to in the next 45 days while the continuing resolution is still in place?
Yeah, I mean, I think I encourage this as many times as people will allow me. Contact your members of Congress. People don't do that because they don't think their voice is going to make a difference. It really does. It really does have an impact, especially when it's not just you calling, but you tell your friends from church, your neighbors, people you interact with in social clubs, at the gym, what have you. When you tell them, hey, let's all contact our senator, our member of Congress, and let's tell them, get to work, let's cut some spending, let's take this job seriously. I think they will listen, and they will start to change Washington a little bit, and a little bit really helps. But yeah, I think the problem right now is we have this 24-hour news cycle where everyone wants to go get on TV, pound on the table, and say, I'm right, everybody else is wrong. I think at the end of the day, we need some better leadership. We need people to really step up to the plate and provide leadership. And Trump did that. Trump was absolutely the undisputed leader of the Republican Party, and he was able to push people in the right direction. We talk about his biggest legislative achievement, in my estimation, was the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017, and he really helped usher that across the finish line by twisting the arms in some instances of Republicans that were a little hesitant to vote for it. And it's been an extraordinarily successful piece of legislation thanks to so who's going to step in? Is that going to be Trump? Is that going to be somebody else? I don't know. But you can certainly feel that vacuum of leadership amongst Republicans right now when it comes to legislation, when it comes to steering us in the direction of fiscal responsibility, and we're paying the price for that.
Yeah, and it seems like McCarthy is not able to step in that gap and especially kind of corral some of these, wild stallions, if I can put it that way, like the Matt Gaetz of the world and in his coalition. And so in just the last 30 seconds I have with you, Brandon Arnold, who's the Executive Vice President of the National Taxpayers Union, what does McCarthy need to get done then? I mean, do you think he can be an effective leader?
I think he can be an effective leader. I think he needs to sit down and have a drink with Matt Gaetz, have dinner with Matt Gaetz, and try to hash this out, because I think so much of it is personal. And listen, it becomes really easy if you're a fan of football to get frustrated with your quarterback when he throws an interception or two and to say, put in the backup quarterback. But before you make that claim, you always have to look at who's sitting on the bench there. Do you have somebody that can step up and demonstrate the leadership that you're demanding, that has that skill set? That person may be out there, but if you're just trying to tear things down without an acceptable replacement, without a better solution going forward, then you're not really helping things. And I haven't heard anything to that effect. If we are going to replace McCarthy, and I'm not sure we should, I probably would rather keep him, honestly, and move on and fight these legislative fights. You better be sure that we need a better person stepping up that will provide that leadership. I'm not sure who that is.
Really great points. All right, Brandon Arnold, thanks so much, and we'll be right back with more here on Jenna Ellis in the Morning.